In my 78 years of life, I never thought my own children would try to murder me for money. But that message on the beach saved my life. It was July 15, 2023. A perfect summer Saturday on the beaches of Chicago. The sun sparkled across Lake Michigan like diamonds scattered on blue velvet. Children built sand castles while seagulls circled overhead, their cries mingling with laughter and the gentle lapping of waves. I adjusted my wide-brimmed hat, a necessity these days to protect my aging skin. 2 years had passed since I lost my dear Jack to pancreatic cancer in September 2021. Years of learning to navigate life alone after 52 years of marriage. 2 years of family relationships growing increasingly strained. Mom, I brought you some lemonade. David handed me a plastic cup, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. At 55, my eldest had always been driven, ambitious. His consulting firm kept him perpetually busy, too busy to visit his widowed mother more than a handful of times a year. Today he wore an expensive watch that caught the sunlight. I wondered briefly how a mid-level consultant afforded such luxury. Thank you, dear. I took a sip, appreciating the tart sweetness. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? Perfect. Sophia popped down on the beach chair beside me, adjusting her designer sunglasses. At 52, my middle child had always been image-conscious. She worked for a pharmaceutical company, lived in a trendy downtown condo, and rarely called, except on holidays. I'm so glad we're doing this. Mom, family time is important, Megan. My youngest at 48 was building a sand castle with her toes, her expression distant despite her physical presence. We should do this more often, she said, though her tone lacked conviction. I had to confess, I was thrilled despite noticing these subtle contradictions. Since Jack's death, family gatherings had become rare events. David was always absorbed in his business. Sophia lived in her world of luxury, and Megan, sweet Megan, had drifted away, becoming a stranger who checked in with obligatory monthly calls. But today they seemed different, more attentive, more loving. They'd insisted on this family beach day, had picked me up in David's new Mercedes, and now surrounded me under a large blue umbrella near a beachside bar for the first time in a long time. Felt included in something. Tell us about your week, Mom, Sophia prompted, applying more sunscreen to her arms. Oh, nothing exciting. Tuesday was bridge club with Margaret and Eleanor. Wednesday I volunteered at the church food bank. Thursday, that sounds nice. David interrupted, clearly not interested in the mundane details of my life. Have you thought more about downsizing from that big house? Must be so much to maintain on your own. There it was again, the gentle but persistent pressure to change my living situation. Jack and I had purchased our modest 3-bedroom home in 1975. We'd raised our children there, celebrated countless Christmases and birthdays within those walls. Every corner held memories. I managed just fine, I said perhaps a bit defensively. Mrs. Peterson's grandson comes by weekly to help with the yard work. Sophia exchanged a quick glance with David. But wouldn't it be easier in a retirement community, people your own age, activities organized for you, no maintenance worries? Maybe someday, I deflected, not wanting to ruin our rare family day with this recurring disagreement. But for now I'm happy where I am. Megan finally joined our circle, brushing sand from her hands. The nursing home where I volunteer part-time has some really nice units opening up. Very affordable too. Nursing home. The word stung. I was 78, not 98. I still drove my own car, maintained my own home, volunteered in my community, and had an active social life. Why were they so eager to pack me away? I appreciate your concern, I said carefully. But I'm not ready for that. The conversation shifted to their lives. David's latest business venture, Sophia's promotion, Megan's plans to upgrade her coastal condo. They chatted animatedly, their voices rising with enthusiasm as they described purchases and plans that seemed extravagant given their modest professional incomes. I watched families enjoying the day, parents playing with children, grandparents watching over toddlers, teenagers laughing together, normal family dynamics that somehow felt foreign to our current reality. What had changed? When had the loving children I raised become these distant adults who viewed me as a problem to solve rather than a person to cherish? My phone vibrated in my beach bag. I rarely received texts. Most of my friends preferred calling. So I pulled it out. Curious. Unknown number. Leave quietly. Don't say anything to your children. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lake breeze. Who would send such a message? And why specifically mention my children? I glanced at David, Sophia, and Megan, still engrossed in their conversation. Their laughter suddenly sounded strange to my ears. Forced, theatrical. The phone vibrated. Again. Another message from the same number. It's urgent. Your life depends on it. I'm in the parking lot. Red car. Trust me. My heart began to pound. All my life I've been cautious. Jack used to tease me about triple-checking that the oven was off before we left the house. But I've also learned to trust my instincts, and something about this felt terrifyingly authentic. I feel a little dizzy, I announced, rising slowly from my lounge chair. I think it was too much sun. I'm going to take a short walk to cool off. David stood immediately. Do you want me to come with you, Mom? No, I replied with what I hoped was a natural smile. I just need to walk a bit. I'll be right back. Sophia looked concerned. Or was she calculating? Be careful, Mom. Don't go too far. I'll be fine. I grabbed my phone and small purse, leaving my other belongings behind to suggest a temporary departure. I walked toward the parking lot with measured steps, fighting the urge to run. My mind raced with possibilities. Who knew I was here? Who knew my children well enough to send such a specific warning? The parking lot was half full, rows of vehicles baking in the summer heat. And there it was, a modest red Ford Focus parked near the exit. A woman with brown hair tied in a neat ponytail stood beside it, her posture tense, eyes scanning the area with nervous vigilance. When she spotted me, recognition flashed across her face. Sarah, I whispered in disbelief. Sarah Williams had worked as David's housekeeper for 8 years. A responsible, discreet woman and single mother to a little girl named Olivia. I'd always made sure David treated her fairly, ensuring she received paid time off when Olivia was born and quietly covering Olivia's medical bills last year when the child developed pneumonia. Mrs. Parker, she said with a trembling voice. Thank you for coming. I know this must seem very strange, but I need you to listen carefully. She glanced nervously toward the beach. Your life is in danger. The world seemed to stop around me. The distant shrieks of playing children, the rumble of cars, the murmur of beachgoers. Everything faded as my mind processed her words. What are you talking about, Sarah? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, too calm for the bombshell she just dropped. She glanced nervously toward the beach, where my children were surely wondering why I was taking so long. We can't talk here. Please get in the car. For 8 years, Sarah had proven herself honest and dependable. If she was risking so much to warn me about something, it had to be serious. I slid into the passenger seat, and she started the engine immediately, pulling out of the parking lot with controlled urgency. Mrs. Parker, she began as we merged into traffic. I'm about to tell you will be very difficult to believe, but your children are planning to hurt you. The words echoed in my head like alarm bells. My children planning to hurt me. It was impossible to fathom. Yet the seriousness in Sarah's face compelled me to listen. She drove to a quiet, industrial area away from prying eyes and parked behind an abandoned warehouse. With trembling hands she reached for her phone. I've worked for David since 2015, she explained. Before that, I was a legal secretary for 5 years. I understand documents, financial records. I know what's normal and what's suspicious. This detail about her background, something I hadn't known, suddenly made everything more credible. Yesterday, while cleaning David's home office, I found some papers that concern me. I took pictures as evidence. She swiped her screen and showed me the first image. It was a bank document with my signature, but I had no memory of signing it. The date was July 8, 2023, just 1 week ago. Do you recognize this signature, Mrs. Parker? I examined the screen closely. The signature was undeniably mine. The distinctive way I looped the E in Evelyn, the slight upward tilt of the final R in Parker. Yes, that's my signature. But I tried to remember. Wait, that was the day of the barbecue at David's house. They asked me to sign several forms. Said they were routine documents for the family's health insurance. Sarah nodded grimly. What they wanted you to believe. But look at what you actually signed. She zoomed in on the image. My eyes widened in horror. It wasn't insurance paperwork at all. It was a bank transfer authorization for $950,000. My entire life savings, everything Jack and I had worked for across 5 decades of marriage, careful saving and prudent investments. This can't be real, I murmured, feeling the blood drain from my face. There's more, Sarah continued, showing me another image. This time it was a power of attorney document giving David absolute control over all my assets. The third image was even more disturbing. A draft of a forged will where I left my entire estate to my 3 children, eliminating charitable donations I had planned for my church in the children's hospital that had treated Jack. How is this possible? I was conscious when I signed these. I remember that day perfectly. Sarah looked at me with a mixture of compassion and urgency. Mrs. Parker, do you remember feeling strange afterward? Dizziness, confusion, drowsiness, a shiver ran down my spine. Indeed, I remembered feeling unusually tired that afternoon. I had blamed my discomfort on the heat and my age. I fell asleep on David's couch, I admitted weakly. I thought it was the wine. I found this in David's kitchen, she said, showing me another photo. It was a small bottle with a medical label, bromazine 6 mg. There were also traces of a clear liquid in a separate vial. My mind worked feverishly, connecting the dots, the insistent family lunch, my strange drowsiness, the documents I signed without reading completely because I trusted my family. They drugged me, I whispered more to myself than to her. Think so, yes, but the worst is yet to come. Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. Last night while clearing the dinner plates, I overheard a phone conversation David was having. He was talking to someone about a very large debt, Mrs. Parker. He mentioned the amount of $380,000. The figure hit me like a physical blow. It was a fortune that none of my children could gather with their regular incomes. David sounded desperate, Sarah continued. He was telling the person on the phone that the old problem would be solved soon, that he had access to the necessary funds. When he mentioned your name, I knew I had to warn you. Who do they owe so much money to? I'm not entirely sure, but I heard names that scared me. People from the south side of Chicago involved in illegal loans. David repeated the name Victor the Shark several times. I knew that reputation. Chicago had its dangerous areas, and ruthless loan sharks were a reality I preferred to ignore. But now that reality had reached into my own family, but if they already have access to my money with these forged documents, why would they need to? Sarah interrupted me with a grave expression. Because there's a problem, Mrs. Parker. The banks are being more cautious with large transfers from seniors. They need you to be present, conscious, and personally ratify any transactions over $100,000. Then I understood the extent of the danger. It wasn't enough to have drugged me once to get my signature. They needed to keep me under control, manipulable, perhaps permanently unable to make independent decisions. There's something else you should know, Sarah added in a barely audible voice. This morning before they left for the beach, I heard Sophia on the phone with someone. Mentioned something about a plan B in case you became difficult. I couldn't hear everything clearly, but she mentioned words like accident, stairs at home, and quick inheritance. The horror of the situation hit me with full force. My own children, my own flesh and blood, weren't just planning to rob me. They were willing to kill me if necessary. That's why I sent you the message, Mrs. Parker. I called the police last night and explained everything. They're investigating, but they need more evidence. They told me they would search your house this afternoon while you're away with your children. The police are involved. Detective James Davis is handling the case. He suggested I warn you discreetly when you went out together today. My mind struggled to process this overwhelming information. In less than an hour, I'd gone from enjoying a family day at the beach to discovering my children were planning to drug me, rob me, and possibly kill me. What do we do now, Sarah? My voice sounded small even to myself. We need to go directly to the police station. Detective Davis wants to take your statement and do a blood test to see if there are still traces of the drugs they gave you last week. I felt a mixture of gratitude and terror. Gratitude toward this brave woman who had risked everything to save me, and terror at the inconceivable betrayal by my own children. Thank you, Sarah. Don't know how I can ever repay you for what you've done. She looked at me with determination. You always treated me with respect and dignity, Mrs. Parker. When Olivia was sick last year, you paid her medical bills without me even asking. I could never let them hurt you. As we headed toward the police station, a question hammered in my mind. How had my family reached this point of desperation? And more importantly, what else were they willing to do to get my money? The drive to the police department took 15 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Sarah drove with obvious nervousness, constantly checking the rear-view mirror. I stared out the window at the familiar Chicago streets, now seeming alien and threatening. Mrs. Parker, Sarah said, breaking the tense silence. There are more details you need to know before you talk to Detective Davis. What I discovered is much more complex than I initially thought. Pulled over on a side street near the station and turned to me with a worried expression. Last night, after overhearing David's phone call, I decided to investigate further. I waited until everyone was asleep and searched his office thoroughly. I found a hidden folder behind some books. She took out her phone again and showed me pictures of documents that made my blood run cold. They were receipts for extravagant purchases. A brand new Mercedes-Benz for $95,000 in David's name. Luxury jewelry for Sophia worth $45,000 and a coastal condo that Megan had recently bought for $180,000. None of your children have enough income to afford these things, Sarah explained. David makes about $300 to $500 a month at his consulting job. Sophia gets around $2,800 as an administrator, and Megan barely makes $2,200 at her part-time job. It's impossible for them to maintain such a lifestyle. The math was crushing. Between them, they didn't make more than $9,000 a month. Nowhere near enough to sustain the luxuries they had clearly been enjoying. So how did they finance all this? That's the scariest part, Mrs. Parker. I found private loan contracts signed with illegal lenders. The terms are brutal. 15% monthly interest. Personal guarantees that include physical threats, and impossible repayment deadlines. He showed me photocopies of those contracts. The creditors' names were unfamiliar, but the amounts were astronomical. David owed $150,000, Sophia $120,000, and Megan $110,000. Total of $380,000 heirs in debt to people who, according to the contract clauses, would not hesitate to use violent methods to collect. And this Victor the Shark, from what I could discreetly find out, he's the leader of an organization dedicated to loan sharking in the rougher neighborhoods of Chicago. He has a criminal record for extortion, serious threats, and assault. His collection methods are known for their brutality. Chill ran down my spine. My children had not only fallen into the clutches of ruthless lenders, but had chosen one of the most dangerous in the region. When are these loans due? Sarah checked her photos. The final deadline is July 20th, 2023. That's in 5 days. If they don't pay in full, the consequences would be severe. Now, I understood the desperation driving their plan. They had no alternative. Either they got my money immediately, or they would face retaliation that could include physical violence, damage to their property, or worse. But there's something more disturbing I found, Sarah continued in a trembling voice. A recorded conversation on David's phone that he apparently forgot to delete. She played a low-quality audio, but it was clear enough to understand the dialogue. It was David's voice talking to a man with a thick Chicago accent. Victor, I need more time. The old lady is more suspicious than we thought. There's no more time. David, you know the rules. $380,000 by Thursday, or we start with the corrections. Have a plan. My mother has almost $1 million saved up. I just need her to be cooperative. And if she doesn't cooperate. There was a long pause before David responded with a coldness that shattered my heart. Then we'll have to speed up her departure. A household accident. Something natural for a woman her age. The inheritance would be processed in weeks. Tears streamed down my face. Hearing my own son plan my death with such calculation was more painful than any financial betrayal. When did you record this? My voice was barely audible. The night before last. David was talking in the garden, thinking no one was listening. But he left his bedroom window open and his phone was connected to an automatic recorder he uses for work meetings. Are the others involved in the plan completely? Found text messages between the 3 siblings coordinating the details. Sophia had researched medications that could simulate a natural heart attack. Megan had discreetly consulted with a funeral home about rapid cremation procedures. The scale of their conspiracy overwhelmed me. It wasn't an impulsive decision driven by financial desperation. It was a meticulously crafted plan where each sibling had specific responsibilities to ensure my elimination and immediate access to my inheritance. What kind of drugs did they use on me? Last week. According to what I found, a combination of brazepam, a powerful anti-anxiety drug mixed with a liquid derivative known as catrolum. This second substance causes temporary confusion, short-term memory loss, and an excessive sense of trust that makes victims sign documents without questioning them. Where did they get those substances? Sophia works at a pharmaceutical company. She has access to controlled medications and knows their effects. She had been preparing this mixture for weeks. The puzzle was coming together. It wasn't a coincidence that they had invited me to that family lunch, nor that they had insisted I try the special wine they had bought for the occasion. Everything had been calculated to temporarily incapacitate me and get my signature on documents I didn't remember reading completely. Sarah, why did you decide to risk so much to help me? You could have just quit and found another job. She looked at me with a mixture of determination and emotion. Mrs. Parker, you were the only person who treated me with dignity when I needed it most. When Olivia was born and I became a single mother, you made sure David gave me paid maternity leave. When my daughter was sick last year, you personally paid the medical bills without me asking. Her words moved me deeply. Besides, she continued, if I allowed them to hurt a person as good as you, what kind of example would I be for my daughter? Some principles are worth more than any job. As we finally headed toward the entrance of the police station, a terrible certainty settled in my mind. The family I had loved and protected for decades was willing to murder me for money. And if I didn't act immediately, in 5 days I could be dead. The station's lobby was brightly lit and surprisingly quiet for a Saturday afternoon. The air conditioning was a welcome relief from the July heat, but nothing could cool the burning sense of betrayal consuming me. Mrs. Parker, Sarah whispered, no matter what happens, please remember you're not alone in this. I'll help you through every step. I squeezed her hand gratefully, still struggling to accept the reality of my situation. How had it come to this? Had my beloved children transformed into strangers capable of planning my death while we waited? My mind began a painful journey into the past. Sarah's revelations had opened a deep wound, but they had also forced me to re-examine the last 2 years with devastating clarity. It all started on September 23, 2021. Jack, my husband of 52 years, passed away after a 6-month battle with pancreatic cancer. I vividly remembered how my children behaved during those final days. Attentive, loving, seemingly devastated by the impending loss of their father. But now, with this new perspective, certain details I had interpreted as filial love took on a sinister meaning. During Jack's last weeks, David had repeatedly insisted on knowing our financial details. He said it was important to be prepared to help me with the paperwork after the funeral. Sophia was the one who asked the most about my savings and retirement plans. Mom, we want to make sure you have everything you need, she repeated constantly. At the time, I took their insistence as genuine concern for my future well-being. Megan had been more subtle, offering to accompany me to doctor's appointments and bank meetings, always with the excuse of supporting Mom in these difficult times. Never Suspected she was memorizing information about my accounts and investments. The first few months after the funeral were the darkest of my existence. The house felt empty, silent, filled with memories that both comforted and suffocated me. Jack had been my anchor, my reason for getting up every morning. Without him, I sank into a depression that almost consumed me. That's when I found refuge in faith. St. Peter's Parish became my sanctuary. Father William Carter, a wise man of 65, welcomed me with understanding and patience. I started attending Sunday Mass, then weekday services, and eventually became a daily parishioner. Evelyn, Father William, would tell me, "The pain you feel is the other side of the love you shared with Jack. Don't run from it. Accept it as part of your eternal connection with him." His words comforted me, and gradually I found peace in prayer, in meditation, in the feeling of being part of something bigger than my own suffering. The church gave me structure when my life lacked purpose, and community when loneliness threatened to destroy me. During this period of spiritual renewal, my children intensified their visits. First, I was thrilled, thinking we had finally developed the family bonds Jack had always wanted. David came on Tuesday afternoons, Sophia on Thursdays, and Megan on Saturdays. Seemed like a perfect routine of family support. But now, remembering those visits with new awareness, I recognized disturbing patterns. They always asked about my health in a specific way. Was I taking any medication? Was I having trouble remembering things? Had I considered setting up a power of attorney for medical emergencies? The questions about money were constant but disguised as concern. "Mom, have you thought about consolidating your savings into a single account to simplify management? Wouldn't it be more convenient to have online access to your funds? Have you updated your will since Dad passed away?" David had been particularly insistent on this last point in January 2022, just 4 months after the funeral. He pressured me to visit the lawyer as a precaution. I vividly remembered that visit to Thomas Johnson's office. David accompanied me and stayed present throughout the entire consultation. The lawyer had prepared several documents that, according to David, would modernize my will and protect my assets. I signed everything confidently, believing I was securing my children's future. But now I wondered what additional documents they might have slipped in among those papers. Had I signed powers of attorney without realizing it? Bank authorizations hidden among legitimate will clauses. Sophia had adopted a different but equally effective strategy. She presented herself as the unofficial family administrator, offering to handle my monthly bills and paperwork. "Mom, let me help you with these boring things. You focus on recovering emotionally." Gradually, she had taken control over various aspects of my daily financial life. She paid my utility bills, handled bank correspondence, and took care of renewing insurance and subscriptions. In retrospect, this had given her complete access to information about my financial resources. Megan had chosen the most subtle and manipulative approach. She focused on my emotional state, presenting herself as the understanding daughter who best comprehended my pain. "Mom, you can trust me with any concern. The older ones sometimes don't understand, but I'll always be here for you." Her visits included long conversations about Jack, shared memories, and plans to honor his legacy. During these intimate chats, Megan extracted information about my charitable intentions, my desire to donate to the parish, and my plans for the future. Now I understood that each child had developed a specialty within their conspiracy. David handled the legal and notary aspects. Sophia controlled the day-to-day financial administration, and Meghan manipulated my emotional state to keep me vulnerable and trusting. The most significant change had occurred in the last 6 months. Their visits became more frequent but also more tense. I noticed exchanges of glances between them, conversations that stopped abruptly when I entered the room, and a level of stress I didn't know how to interpret. In June 2023, David had suggested those regular family gatherings at his house. "Mom, now that you're doing better emotionally, we should spend more time together as a family." Dad would have wanted to see us united. Those Sunday lunches at David's house became weekly events that I looked forward to with genuine joy. Finally, we seemed to have found the family harmony Jack had dreamed of. But for my children, those gatherings had a completely different purpose: to study my routines, assess my mental state, and prepare the ground for their final plan. The lunch on July 8th, when they drugged me to get my signature, had simply been the culmination of months of meticulous preparation. Mrs. Parker, I looked up to see a man in his early 50s with kind eyes and a serious expression. He wore a crisp button-down shirt with a detective's badge clipped to his belt. "I'm Detective James Davis. Thank you for coming in." He extended his hand, which I shook automatically. "And you must be Sarah Williams. Your call last night was very timely. This is all happening so fast," I said, my voice sounding distant even to myself. Detective Davis nodded sympathetically. "I understand this is overwhelming, Mrs. Parker. But based on what Ms. Williams has shared, we need to move quickly to ensure your safety. Would you please follow me?" As we walked down the corridor to his office, I felt as though I were moving through a dream, or rather a nightmare. The detective's words confirmed the reality of my situation. My children were plotting to kill me, and time was running out. Detective James Davis's office reflected the man himself: orderly, professional, and intensely focused. Certificates and combinations lined one wall, while a detailed map of Chicago dominated another. His desk held neatly arranged files, 2 computer monitors displaying databases, and a single family photo tucked discreetly in the corner. "Mrs. Parker, before we proceed with your formal statement, I'd like our forensic team to run some urgent tests," Detective Davis said, gesturing for me to sit in a chair across from his desk. "We need blood and hair samples to detect any possible residues of substances that may have been administered without your consent. Is it still possible to detect anything after a week?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the circumstances. "Depending on the substances used. Bromazepam can remain detectable in blood for 3 to 7 days, and certain metabolites persist in hair for up to 3 months. If they really gave you the combination Ms. Williams describes, we'll find evidence." A forensic technician entered carrying a professional medical case. The procedure was quick but thorough: blood draw, hair samples, and a basic physical exam to assess my overall health. Throughout the process, the detective continued explaining the legal steps that would follow. Based on the photographic evidence Ms. Williams provided, we obtained a court order to tap your children's communications and search their homes. The operation began 2 hours ago. They're already at my house. The reality of the investigation suddenly hit me. Indeed, a specialized team is executing simultaneous searches at the residences of David, Sophia, and Meghan. We've also requested that the Bank freeze all their accounts to prevent unauthorized transfers while the investigation is ongoing. Police efficiency pleasantly surprised me. In less than 24 hours since Sarah's call, they had organized a complex operation that protected my interests and sought additional evidence against my children. Detective, what will happen when my children get back from the beach and discover the search? We've coordinated the operation to coincide with their absence. Our agents have orders to complete the search before they return. Davis leaned forward, adopting a more confidential posture. Mrs. Parker, we want to organize a controlled operation that will allow us to obtain direct confessions from your children. Documentary evidence is strong, but recorded testimonies would considerably strengthen the case. What kind of operation? We would need you to return to David's house tonight, acting normally, but wearing hidden recording devices. If we can get them to verbally admit to the plan, we'll have irrefutable evidence of conspiracy to commit fraud and possibly premeditated murder. The proposal terrified me. Voluntarily returning to the place where my own children had planned to drug me again, knowing they were desperate and that their debt deadlines were days away seemed extremely dangerous. Are there no less risky alternatives? My hands trembled slightly as I clutched my purse. I understand your concern, the detective explained, consulting his notes. But let's consider the current legal situation. We have documentary evidence of forgery, photographs of controlled substances, and compromising phone recordings. However, a competent lawyer could argue that you signed those documents consciously, that the medications are for legitimate medical use, and that the recorded conversations are open to multiple interpretations. Sarah, who had remained silent during the conversation, intervened with determination. Mrs. Parker, I'll be there to protect you. I can ensure you don't consume anything they offer you and maintain constant communication with the police. Ms. Williams is right, Davis confirmed. She would be our official collaborator in the operation. Additionally, we'll install external surveillance equipment and have rapid response units positioned within a 2-block radius. What happens if something goes wrong? If they realize they're being recorded or if they decide to accelerate their plan? We've considered those risks. You would carry an emergency device that would trigger immediate intervention if you press a specific button. Also, we'll establish security codes that M. Williams can use to request help without arousing suspicion. The detective showed me a tiny device similar to a shirt button equipped with a high-sensitivity microphone and GPS transmitter. The technology impressed me with its sophistication and discretion. Let's also consider the consequences of not acting decisively, Davis continued. Your children are under extreme pressure from violent lenders. If they don't get the money in the next few days, they might try something desperate and irreversible. His words forced me to confront a terrible reality. Regardless of my fears, my children had already crossed moral lines from which there was no return. If I didn't stop them now, when I had police protection and legal evidence, the next opportunity might be too late. When would this operation be? Ideally tonight. According to our investigations, your children were planning to invite you to dinner tomorrow, Sunday, to finalize certain family matters. Getting ahead of their timeline would give us a tactical advantage. How would I explain my unexpected return after leaving the beach? Sarah suggested a convincing alibi. You felt unwell during your walk. I found you disoriented near the parking lot, and I accompanied you to David's house so your children could take care of you. The forensic technician returned with preliminary results from the tests. Detective, we confirm the presence of bromazepam in significant concentrations and have detected traces of a substance consistent with citrulline derivatives. The levels suggest administration in high doses about a week ago. Perfect. Davis nodded. This scientifically confirms that you were drugged. We have a solid basis to proceed with criminal charges. The scientific validation of Sarah's suspicions filled me with a mixture of relief and horror. Relief because I finally had objective proof of the betrayal. Horror because it confirmed that my own children had been willing to chemically incapacitate me to love me. I stared at my hands, noticing how the veins had become more prominent. Age. These same hands had once cradled each of my children as newborns, had wiped away their tears, prepared countless meals, applauded at their graduations. How had we arrived at this moment where those I had given life to were now plotting to take mine? Detective, I said. Finally, my voice stronger than I expected. I agree to participate in the operation, but I need one guarantee. Something goes wrong. If my life is in real danger, your agents will intervene immediately, regardless of the state of the recording. You have my personal word and my professional commitment. Mrs. Parker, your safety is our absolute priority. As we began to discuss the operational details, I felt a strange calm settle over me. For 2 years, I had been adrift, vulnerable in my grief. But now faced with the ultimate betrayal, I found a strength I thought had died with Jack. These were not the children I had raised, nor the adults I thought I had educated with ethical values. They were desperate criminals, willing to do anything for money, and I would be the instrument of their own downfall. While we waited for the specialized team to assemble, Detective Davis received an urgent call. His expression grew increasingly serious as he listened, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. You see, and you found it. Where? Exactly. Behind the false wall in the basement. Photograph everything before moving it. I want chain of custody. Impeccable on this one. When he hung up, he turned to me with a grave expression. Mrs. Parker, the search team at your son's house has discovered something unexpected. It appears David has been keeping a detailed journal about the entire plan. In it, he mentions that your late husband, Jack, had confronted him about financial irregularities shortly before his death. This revelation struck me like a physical blow. Jack knew he never said anything to me. According to what they found so far, Mr. Parker discovered that David had been embezzling money from his consulting clients. He threatened to report him unless he returned the funds and sought help. The journal suggests that this confrontation happened approximately 1 week before your husband's condition suddenly worsened. The implication hung in the air, too terrible to articulate. Could David have known? I couldn't allow myself to think it. Not yet. Not without proof. We'll investigate this angle thoroughly, Davis assured me, seeing my distress. For now, let's focus on tonight's operation. At 6:30 p.m., we returned to the station to finalize the details. Detective Davis had assembled a specialized team that included surveillance technicians, communications experts, and agents from the Rapid Intervention Unit. The professionalism of the group reassured me considerably. Mrs. Parker, I'd like you to meet Sergeant Adam Miller, a specialist in undercover operations, and Officer Daniel Clark, an expert in recording devices. The detective announced as he guided me to a meeting room equipped with detailed maps of the neighborhood where David lived. Sergeant Miller, a young man of about 35 with an athletic build and intelligent eyes, laid out several tiny electronic devices on the table. Mrs. Parker will be using 3 redundant recording systems to ensure we capture the entire conversation with perfect clarity, he explained, delicately handling the devices. First, this directional microphone integrated into a shirt button which records audio within a 15-foot radius. Second, a GPS transmitter hidden in your belt that allows us to monitor your exact location in real time. And third, he showed me a small camera the size of a coin. This micro camera with a direct feed installed in your glasses. It will allow us to see exactly what you see and intervene instantly if we detect imminent danger. Officer Clark complimented the technical explanation. All devices are synchronized with our mobile command center, which we will park 150 from David's house. We will have a continuous audio-visual feed and immediate response capability. How does the emergency system work? My voice betrayed my nervousness. Sergeant Miller handed me what looked like an ordinary pin. If you press this N twice in a row, it will trigger a silent alarm in our command center. We will have agents storming the house within 90 seconds. If you press it 3 times, we will consider your life to be in immediate danger and the intervention will be even faster. Sarah raised a crucial concern. How do I communicate with you if I detect something suspicious before Mrs. Parker activates the emergency? Excellent question, Ms. Williams, Officer Clark replied, showing her a seemingly normal cell phone, programmed with speed dial numbers. If you press 1, it will signal situation under control. 2 means caution required and 3 will trigger immediate intervention. Detective Davis unfolded aerial photographs of the residential area where David lived, pointing out strategic positions with red markers. We will have 6 agents, distributed in 3 unmarked vehicles, a delivery van parked across from the park, a private car on the southeast corner, and an electric maintenance motorcycle on the back street. All access points will be monitored. What if my children suspect something unusual in my behavior? We've prepared a credible alibi to explain any nervousness, replied Sergeant Miller, consulting his notes. If they seem puzzled by your attitude, you can attribute it to the medical scare you had at the beach. It's natural for someone your age to feel unsettled after a dizzy spell. Sarah added to the strategy. I'll explain that I found you very worried about your health and that you insisted on coming back to be near your family. They know my careful personality and won't question my version. As the team continued discussing operational details, I excused myself to use the restroom, alone for the first time since this nightmare began. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. The woman looking back at me seemed both familiar and strange. The same silver hair and blue eyes Jack had always loved. The same laugh lines around my mouth, but now with a hardness I'd never seen before. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to steady my nerves. Would Jack say if he could see me now? If he had known what our children were capable of? A memory surfaced Jack in the hospital just days before he died. He had seemed unusually agitated that afternoon, insisting on speaking to me. Alone. Evie, he'd said, using his special nickname for me. Promise me. You'll be careful with the money. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. I had attributed his concern to the medication and the natural worry of a dying husband. Had he been trying to warn me, I returned to the meeting room with renewed determination. If Jack had indeed discovered something sinister before his death, if he had tried to protect me, even then I owed it to his memory to see this through. Mrs. Parker, are you all right? Detective Davis asked with concern. I'm ready, I said firmly. Let's finish preparing. The team spent the next hour briefing me on how to steer the conversation toward incriminating topics. Ideally, we want you to mention concerns about your will or your savings, explained Sergeant Miller. If you express worries about the security of your money, they will likely try to reassure you by offering to help manage it. That will be our opportunity to record incriminating confessions, Officer Clark added. It would also be helpful if you mention feeling confused about documents you remember signing recently. If they're worried you're questioning the signatures from July 8th, they might reveal details about how they obtained them. Should I confront them directly with my suspicions? Absolutely not, Detective Davis replied categorically. Any direct confrontation would put them on high alert and could provoke violent reactions. Maintain the attitude of a concerned but trusting mother. Let them be the ones to reveal compromising information. Sarah intervened with a practical suggestion. Mrs. Parker could mention that she feels grateful to have such responsible children looking after her. That might make them lower their guard and talk more freely about their plans to protect her. How long should the visit last? Between 1 and 2 hours, calculated Sergeant Miller. Enough time to get substantial recordings, but not so long as to raise suspicion about why you're staying longer than usual. The inspector handed me a sealed envelope. Mrs. Parker, these are the transcripts of the phone conversations we intercepted today between your children and Victor the Shark Adams. The threats have intensified considerably. I read with horror excerpts of dialogues where this Victor demanded immediate payment and described in sadistic detail the consequences of non-compliance. They weren't empty threats. They were specific promises of physical violence that included the entire family. When do you plan to intervene with this Victor? Simultaneously with tonight's operation. While we're recording your children's confessions, another team will be arresting Victor and his organization. We want to dismantle the entire network at once. The complexity of the operation impressed me. It wasn't just a case of family fraud. It was a comprehensive investigation against a criminal organization that had extended its tentacles to multiple victims. Are you mentally prepared for this, Mrs. Parker? Officer Clark asked with genuine concern. Hearing your own children confess to plans to murder you will be emotionally devastating. Her question forced me to reflect on the inner strength I would need to complete this mission. For the past 2 years, my renewed faith had taught me about forgiveness and compassion, but also about justice and protecting the innocent. Officer, I have lived 78 years and raised 3 children believing in values like honesty, family loyalty, and respect for life. Discovering that my own children have betrayed those principles is painful, but allowing them to continue doing so would be a betrayal of everything my husband and I tried to teach them. Sarah took my hand in a supportive gesture. Mrs. Parker, remember you are not alone in this. We are all here to protect you and ensure that justice prevails. Detective Davis checked the watches of all the participants. It's 7:15 p.m. We'll begin deployment at 7:30. Mrs. Parker and Ms. Williams will arrive at David's house at 8 Huzzers. Exactly. By then all our systems will be operational and ready. As they discreetly fitted me with the recording devices and checked their functionality, a mix of terror and determination filled my chest. In less than an hour, I would face my children, knowing it could be the last conversation we would have as a family. After tonight, they would simply be criminals who had tried to murder their own mother for money. At 8 p.m. sharp, Sarah stopped her car in front of David's house. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid the recording devices would pick up its frantic rhythm. The two-story house, with its modern light brick facade and carefully maintained garden, looked exactly the same as always, but now I perceived it as the stage for a confrontation that would define the rest of my existence. The lights in the main living room were on, casting a warm glow that in other circumstances would have been welcoming. Tonight, however, that brightness seemed sinister, like the deceptive shine of a carefully laid trap. "Mrs. Parker, remember to act naturally," Sarah whispered discreetly, checking her emergency phone. "I'll handle everything related to food and drinks. Don't touch anything that hasn't passed through my hands first." I took a deep breath, adjusted my glasses equipped with a micro camera, and gently touched the emergency pen in my right pocket to confirm its location. The wires from the button microphone felt strange against my chest, but I hoped my blouse would hide them adequately. The door opened. Before we could even ring the bell, David appeared with an expression that combined fig-ned relief and apparent concern. "Mom, thank God you're okay. We were so worried when you disappeared from the beach without a word." He hugged me with an effusiveness that now felt completely fake, knowing his true intentions. "Sarah found me feeling dizzy near the parking lot," I explained, following the prepared script. I felt confused and disoriented. I think it was too much sun for someone my age. Sophia appeared from the kitchen, drawing her hands on a floral apron. Her smile seemed genuinely relieved, which momentarily confused me. Was it possible she still had some shred of authentic love for me? Or was she simply a consummate actress? "Mom, you gave us such a scare. Megan is in the living room. She was about to call the hospitals to see if you'd been admitted." Megan emerged from inside the house, practically running. Her eyes showed an anxiety that could be interpreted as filial love, but which I now suspected had entirely different motivations. "Mom, are you feeling better? Do you need me to take you to the doctor? Your blood pressure has been irregular lately." Fine, honey. I just need to rest a bit and maybe have something cool to drink," I replied, allowing them to guide me to the main living room. The inside of the house reflected the standard of living my children had been maintaining with borrowed money, Italian leather furniture, a giant screen TV, decorations that obviously cost more than any of their monthly salaries. Every object reminded me they had been living an unsustainable financial lie. "Sarah, please bring some mineral water from the fridge," David requested with a seemingly casual tone. But I detected an underlying tension in his voice. "Of course, Mr. Parker," Sarah replied, heading to the kitchen. She had been specifically instructed to control everything I was offered to drink. I sat on the main sofa from where I could observe the expressions of my 3 children. Sophia settled to my right, Megan to my left, and David remained standing in front of me, unconsciously adopting a dominant position that I found revealing. "Mom, we've been discussing your financial situation," David began with a seemingly concerned tone. "At your age, managing so many savings and complex banking decisions must be stressful. Why do you bring that up now?" I asked, feigning innocent surprise. Sophia intervened with calculated gentleness. "Mom, we know that Dad always took care of a lot of the paperwork. Without him, you must feel overwhelmed by so much financial responsibility. It's true that some things have gotten more complicated," I admitted, following the strategy suggested by the police. Lately, I've been feeling confused about some documents I remember signing. The three of them exchanged quick glances that the micro camera would have definitely captured. David cleared his throat before answering. What kind of documents are you worried about, Mom? Well, I remember signing papers a week ago during our family lunch, but I can't quite remember what they were for. Memory isn't what it used to be. I carefully observed their reactions. Megan leaned towards me with an understanding expression. Mom, those were just update forms for your health insurance. Nothing important, just routine paperwork that we're handling to help you out. But I have a feeling there were large numbers involved, amounts that seemed significant. I pressed on, maintaining a tone of genuine confusion. David sat down in the armchair across from me, adopting a posture that was meant to be relaxed, but revealed muscular tension. Mom, maybe it's time we consider setting up a simpler system to manage your finances, something that takes the pressure off you and allows you to enjoy your retirement without administrative worries. Sarah returned with a sealed bottle of mineral water, which she opened in front of me before pouring me a glass. Her movements were deliberate and careful, ensuring I could see that the liquid had not been tampered with. What kind of system are you suggesting? I asked, taking a sip of water. Sophia visibly brightened. We could set up a joint account where one of us has authorization to handle your daily expenses. That would free you from having to remember bills, investments, and bank procedures. A joint account. Wouldn't I lose control over my own money? Not at all, Mom, Megan replied with false sweetness. It would simply be an administrative tool. You would maintain absolute ownership. We would just help you with the daily management. Besides, David added, leaning forward, considering your episode at the beach today, it might be wise to have contingencies in place for your own safety and peace of mind. What kind of contingencies? Well, if you had another episode of confusion, or if your health temporarily worsened, you would need someone you trust to access your resources to pay for medication, urgent medical treatments, or any emergency. Sophia explained in a seemingly logical tone. The conversation was unfolding exactly as the police had anticipated. Children were presenting seemingly reasonable arguments to gain control over my assets, but now I knew their true motivations. How much money do you think would be necessary to keep in that joint account? I asked, feigning genuine consideration. David exchanged another quick glance with his sisters before answering. To be completely safe, maybe most of your savings. That way, you'd be protected against any eventuality. Most of it. We're talking about the $950,000 I have saved up. The silence that followed was deafening. I had just confirmed the exact amount of my assets. Information they needed to verify to finalize their plans. Mom, how do you know that specific figure? Megan asked with a curiosity that she couldn't completely hide. I checked my bank statements last week. Was it after our family lunch when I felt so strange and sleepy for some reason? I had insomnia that night and decided to check my finances. The three of them became visibly nervous. If I had really checked my accounts after July 8th, I would have discovered the discrepancies caused by the documents they had made me sign under the influence of drugs. Did you find anything unusual in your accounts? Sophia asked, her voice trembling slightly. Well, there were some movements I didn't remember authorizing, I replied, watching as the tension in the room palpably intensified. David stood up abruptly and started walking towards the window. Sometimes banks process transactions with delays. It's normal to see movements that correspond to previous authorizations. Transactions of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Silence once again filled the living room. I had just crossed a line that would force them to either reveal compromising information or admit their involvement in the financial irregularities. The atmosphere in the living room had become suffocating. My 3 children exchanged loaded glances that I could now interpret with terrifying clarity. David stopped pacing and turned to me with an expression that tried to remain calm, but his eyes betrayed a growing desperation. "Mom, I think there's a misunderstanding about those bank movements," he said slowly, returning to his seat like a predator sizing up its prey. "Maybe we should clarify exactly what you saw in your statements. I saw transfers for considerable amounts that I don't remember authorizing," I repeated, maintaining the tone of vulnerable confusion that had characterized my entire performance. Amounts that could solve very serious financial problems. Sophia shifted restlessly on the sofa, her fingers drumming nervously on the leather cushion. "Mom, sometimes we sign bank documents without paying full attention to the details. It's normal at our age." "Your age? I mean my age. Are you implying my mind isn't working properly anymore?" Megan quickly intervened, trying to soften her sister's comment. "Course not, Mom. Sophia just means that handling complex finances can be stressful for anyone. But you all seem to know more about my finances than I remember telling you." "Myself," I observed, allowing a note of suspicion to filter into my voice for the first time in the conversation. The silence that followed stretched for several uncomfortable seconds. Could see the 3 siblings communicating through glances, apparently reaching some kind of non-verbal consensus. David took a deep breath and adopted a more direct posture. "Mom, we need to be honest with you about our family situation." "What situation?" "The 3 of us. We've had some financial problems recently," he admitted in a tense voice. "Nothing serious, just some debts that piled up faster than we anticipated." Sophia nodded in support of her brother's version. "Mom, we've always been responsible, but the current economic situation has been tough for everyone. Expenses went up. Salaries didn't keep pace." "What kind of debts?" I asked, feigning genuine motherly concern. Megan exchanged a meaningful look with David before answering. "Loans for the houses, the cars, some investments that didn't turn out as we hoped." "How much do you owe in total?" The question landed like a bomb in the living room. 3 of them visibly tensed, and for several seconds no one answered. "It's a considerable amount," David finally mumbled. "Hundreds of thousands." "Yes," Sophia admitted in a barely audible voice. "Almost $380,000. The impact of my specific question was immediate and devastating." David turned completely pale. Sophia let out an involuntary gasp, and Megan brought her hands to her mouth as if to take back the words she was about to say. How do you know that exact figure?" David stammered. "Because that's precisely the amount that appears on transfer documents bearing my signature. A signature I don't remember consciously making," I replied with a calmness I didn't feel inside. Sarah Shue, who had remained discreetly in a corner of the living room, came over to offer me more water. Her movements were deliberately slow, giving me time to process my children's reactions to my revelation. "Mom," Megan said with a broken voice, "if you saw those documents, then you know we're in a desperate situation." "Desperate to what extent?" I kept my tone measured, even as my heart raced beneath my carefully placed microphone. David stood up again and began to pace in circles, running his hands through his hair. "Mom, the people we owe money to are not They're not exactly traditional banks. What does that mean? It means that if we don't pay soon, the consequences go beyond credit problems. Sophia explained, tears starting to form in her. What kind of consequences? Megan sobbed before answering. Mom, they threatened us. They said if we don't pay by Thursday, they would start with with more persuasive methods. Who threatened you? David stopped in front of the window, his back to me. A man named Victor Adams. But everyone knows him by another name. What other name? Victor the Shark. Sophia whispered. The name confirmed everything the police had revealed to me. My children had not only fallen into the web of illegal lenders, but had specifically chosen the most violent and dangerous one in the region. And what did this Victor ask for? A full $380,000 plus accumulated interest. David answered, turning to me, desperation evident on his face. In total, almost $420,000. By when? The day after tomorrow, July 20th. And what happens if you can't pay? Silence once again took over the room. But this time it was different. It was the silence of people who had contemplated terrible possibilities and made irreversible decisions. Mom, Megan finally said in a barely audible voice. Victor explained to us that he has methods to ensure payment one way or another. What methods? David returned to the sofa and sat across from me, leaning forward with an intense expression. Mom, if something happened to you, if you had some accident or a serious health problem, we would inherit immediately. The process would be quick. Especially if there's a clear will and powers of attorney already established. The words I had just heard chilled me to a bone. My own son had just admitted they had considered my death as a solution to their financial problems. Are you suggesting that my death would be convenient for you? Sophia covered her face with her hands. Mom, we didn't want to think about that, but Victor pressured us to consider all available options. Her voice cracked slightly. Momentary glimpse of the daughter I thought I knew. Was there actually remorse behind her perfectly applied makeup or just fear of consequences? All options. Megan sobbed harder before confessing. Mom, Victor told us that if we couldn't get the money from you voluntarily, we would have to secure the payment another way. What other way specifically? David looked me directly in the eyes with a mixture of shame and desperate determination. Mom, at your age, a domestic accident wouldn't be suspicious. A fall down the stairs, a heart problem during the night, something that would seem natural. And you've already planned this accident. The silence confirmed my question more than any words could have. Christina researched medications that could simulate heart problems. Megan admitted between sobs. Megan consulted on rapid cremation procedures to avoid lengthy autopsies. And you, David, what was your part of the plan? My eldest son looked at me with a mixture of pain and resolve that broke my heart. I would be in charge of being with you when it happened, to make sure you didn't suffer and that everything looked natural. Felt physically ill. The carefully rehearsed calm I had maintained began to crack under the weight of these confessions. When was this accident supposed to happen? This week, Sophia whispered. Victor gave us until Thursday, so we would have to act before then. Tomorrow, David nodded. Slowly. We had planned to invite you over tomorrow. It was going to be the last time. The confessions I had just heard confirmed everything the police had suspected, and my own children had not only planned to drug me and steal my money, but they had worked out a detailed plan To murder me and make it look like a natural accident. And after my death, you would inherit immediately. Victor, and no one would suspect a thing. I summarized, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. You would be remembered as a beloved mother who died peacefully at her son's house. Megan explained in a broken voice. Have you considered that you are describing the premeditated murder of your own mother? All three began to cry simultaneously, but their tears no longer moved me. They were tears of self-pity, not genuine remorse. Mom, we had no choice, David moaned. Victor doesn't take excuses. If we don't pay, he'll kill us. And then he'd come for you anyway. Sophia suddenly looked up, her eyes changing from tearful to calculating. Mom, you're talking strangely. You're usually more emotional when we discuss serious family problems. She was right. In my focus on gathering evidence, I'd slipped out of character. The Evelyn Parker they knew would be hysterical by now, not calmly discussing the details of her planned murder. David also stood up, studying my face with growing attention. Mom, are you okay? There's something different about your behavior since you arrived. The tension in the room began to transform. My children were shifting from confessional guilt to defensive suspicion. Their survival instincts were kicking in as they detected inconsistencies in my act. Different in what way? I asked, trying to maintain the character of a confused old woman. Normally, after hearing something so disturbing, you'd be screaming, crying, or at least trembling, David observed, approaching me with cautious steps. You're too calm, too controlled. Sarah intervened from her position by the kitchen doorway. Mrs. Parker has been very upset since the episode at the beach. Maybe the shock made her react differently. Shock, Sophia repeated, looking at Sarah with growing suspicion. Sarah, you found my mother at the beach. But exactly where and how? I found her near the parking lot. She seemed disoriented and worried about her blood pressure. Sarah replied with the rehearsed version. But why were you at the beach? Megan pressed. It was supposed to be your day off, and you usually spend it with Olivia at home. The question revealed a detailed knowledge of Sarah's personal routine that unsettled me. My children had been monitoring their housekeeper's movements with an attention that suggested paranoia or preparation for something specific. Olivia wanted to go to the beach, so we decided to spend the day there, Sarah explained, but her voice betrayed growing nervousness. David stopped directly in front of me, leaning in to examine my face. Mom, something doesn't add up in this whole situation. What doesn't add up? First, you mysteriously disappear from the beach without explanation. Then you return hours later with Sarah, who coincidentally found you. Now you're interrogating us about our financial problems using legal terminology, and you react with unnatural calmness to confessions that should devastate you emotionally. His analysis was too precise. My performance had been convincing during the first part of the conversation, but maintaining the character through such extreme revelations required theatrical skills I didn't possess. I just found out my own children are planning to murder me, I said, partially abandoning the pretense. Did you expect me to react with hysterics? I expected you to react like our mother, not like a professional investigator, he replied, his voice growing increasingly tense. Sophia went to the window and pulled the curtain aside slightly. Mom, there are several vehicles parked in unusual places on our street. A van I've never seen before. Car that's been there for too long. My heart raced. The police operation was being detected. By my children, whose paranoia had heightened their powers of observation. What are you implying, Sophia? Implying that maybe your disappearance from the beach wasn't as accidental as you made us believe, she replied. Turning to me with an increasingly hostile expression, Megan joined her sister by the window. Sophia's right. There's too much suspicious vehicle activity to be a coincidence. David went to a drawer in the living room cabinet and pulled out a small pair of binoculars. He watched the street through them, his expression progressively hardening. Mom, the man in the blue car is wearing an earpiece and has visible communication equipment on the passenger seat. He announced in a cold voice. The delivery van has no real company logos and there's someone watching from inside. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. My children had identified the police surveillance and now considered me responsible for attracting that attention. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm suggesting you betrayed us. David replied with a harshness I had never heard in his voice before. Somehow you alerted the authorities about our conversations. Sarah tried to intervene. Mrs. Parker has been with me all afternoon. She hasn't had a chance to contact anyone. All afternoon with you, Sophia repeated with venomous sarcasm. Housekeeper who coincidentally becomes our mother's constant companion on the same day police surveillance appears on our street. Sarah just helped me when I felt sick, I protested weakly. Megan returned from the window with a look of growing fury. Mom, you know what I think really happened? I think Sarah found out something about our plans, warned you, and together you contacted the police. That's ridiculous. Is it ridiculous? David interrupted, approaching me menacingly. Then explain why you're wearing a different blouse than the one you had on at the beach this morning. His observation hit me like a lightning bolt. Indeed, during the preparation for the operation at the station, I had changed my blouse to accommodate the recording devices, a seemingly insignificant detail that now compromised the entire operation. Changed because the other one was sweaty after the episode at the beach. I lied desperately. And where did you get this new blouse? I don't recognize it from your wardrobe. Sophia pressed with the insight of someone who had been studying my habits for months. Before I could answer, David lunged at me and began to pat down my blouse with expert hands. Mom, there's something hard here, like a strange button. His fingers found the recording device. At that moment the charade was definitively over. It's a microphone, he shouted, violently ripping the device from my blouse. She's recording us. Sophia ran over and began to examine my glasses. And this looks like a tiny camera. Megan ran towards Sarah with a murderous expression. You contacted them. You set all this up. Mrs. Megan, please, Sarah cried, backing away towards the wall. David crushed the microphone under his foot with uncontrolled fury. Mom, you just destroyed your own family. You just condemned us all. At that exact moment, as if waiting for that specific signal, the front and back doors of the house burst open simultaneously with a deafening crash. Police, get on the ground now. Armed officers stormed in from multiple directions, filling the living room with shouts of authoritative commands and the metallic sound of handcuffs being prepared. Detective Davis appeared among the first agents, heading directly towards me. Mrs. Parker, are you hurt? I'm fine, Detective, I replied, watching as my 3 children were forced to the ground with their hands behind their backs. Mom, David screamed as they put the cuffs on him. Betrayed us. We're your family. Mrs. Parker, Officer Clark called from the entrance. "We have simultaneously arrested Victor the Shark Adams and 2 associates. We found documentation confirming the threats against your family." Sophia sobbed hysterically as she was lifted from the floor. "Mom, we were your children. How could you do this? You were my children until you decided to murder me for money." I answered with a firmness that surprised me. Megan looked at me with pure hatred as she was escorted towards the door. "You'll regret this. Family protects each other. They don't betray each other." "Miss Williams, Sergeant," Miller said, approaching Sarah. "Your bravery has saved a life and dismantled a criminal organization. You will have police protection until the legal process is over." As I watched my 3 children being put into separate police vehicles, a mixture of relief and emotional devastation washed over me. I had saved my life, but I had lost my family forever. Detective Davis gently placed his hand on my shoulder. "Mrs. Parker, it's over. You're safe now." But I knew it wasn't really over. The hardest part, living with the knowledge of what my children had been willing to do, was just beginning. The months following that night of July 16th were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, court testimonies, and revelations that continued to shake the foundations of what I once considered my family reality. The legal process formally began on August 15, 2023, when the district attorney's office filed formal charges against David, Sophia, and Megan for attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy, and fraudulent administration of another's assets. The trial was held at the county courthouse, an imposing room with high ceilings and dark wood paneled walls that reflected the solemnity of the judicial system. During the first sessions, I had to face the surreal experience of testifying against my own children, who sat at the defendant's table in prison uniforms, their expressions alternating between shame and resentment. The prosecutor, Catherine Brooks, a 45-year-old woman with a reputation for unwavering toughness in cases of domestic violence, presented a devastatingly solid case. The recordings obtained during the police operation were played in their entirety before the court, causing visible shivers among the jury members as they heard my children plan my murder with calculated coldness. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor declared during her opening statement, "we are faced with one of the most execrable cases of family betrayal to ever come before this court. 3 adult individuals, beneficiaries, 4 decades of their mother's love and generosity, meticulously conspired to drug her, steal her entire fortune, and finally physically eliminate her to accelerate their inheritance." The defense attorneys tried multiple strategies to minimize the severity of the charges. David's lawyer argued that the debts to violent lenders had placed his client under external duress that limited his capacity for rational decision-making. Sophia's defender alleged that her client had acted under the dominant psychological influence of her older brother. Megan's lawyer maintained that she was simply a collateral victim of her siblings' decisions. However, the evidence presented by the prosecution was overwhelming. In addition to the audio and video recordings from the police operation, investigators had recovered extensive records of phone communications, text messages detailing every phase of the plan, and forensic evidence confirming the administration of controlled substances without my consent. The most impactful testimony came from Sarah Williams. For 2 full days, she detailed before the court how she had gradually uncovered the conspiracy, describing with precision the conversations she had overheard, the documents she had photographed, and the moral decision that led her to risk her personal safety to protect me. "Your Honor," Sarah declared with a firm but emotional voice. Mrs. Parker was the only person who treated me with dignity when I needed it most, when I became a single mother. She made sure I kept my job with fair conditions. When my daughter was sick, she personally paid the medical bills without me asking. I could not allow such a kind person to be murdered by her own family. Her words resonated deeply in the courtroom, and several jury members were visibly moved as she described the details of my rescue. The most devastating moment of the trial came when the court played the full recording of my children's confessions. Hearing their voices again, coldly admitting they had planned to speed up my departure and that a domestic accident wouldn't be suspicious, shattered me emotionally. But it also strengthened my resolve that justice should run its course. David tried to address me directly during his testimony. "Mom, I want you to know that we never would have actually gone through with that plan. It was just desperation, just words spoken under extreme pressure." I looked him directly in the eyes and replied with a calmness that surprised me. "David, the recordings prove you had set specific dates, detailed methods, and contingencies to eliminate evidence. Those aren't just words. That is criminal premeditation." Sophia also tried to appeal to my maternal feelings. "Mom, we are your family. We've made terrible mistakes, but we are still your children. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" "It meant everything to me for 78 years," I replied in a broken voice. "But you chose to destroy that relationship when you decided my money was worth more than my life." Megan was the last to testify, and her strategy was the most manipulative. "Mom, Dad would be devastated if he could see how you've destroyed our family. He always taught us that family forgives each other." Her words hurt me deeply, but I found strength in Jack's memory to respond. "Your father taught me about unconditional love, but also about justice and protecting the innocent. He would have never tolerated you trying to murder your own mother." The most revealing phase of the trial was when the prosecutor presented additional evidence discovered during the expanded investigation. Detectives had traced my children's financial activities for the previous 2 years, revealing a pattern of extravagant spending funded entirely by usurious loans. "Your Honor," the prosecutor explained, showing bank documents. "The defendants did not fall into debt due to unforeseen circumstances or economic crisis. They deliberately adopted unsustainable lifestyles, financing luxuries with money borrowed at criminal interest rates, knowing from the beginning that they could not repay those amounts with their legitimate incomes." The receipts presented as evidence painted a picture of systematic financial irresponsibility, dinners at luxury restaurants costing more than the weekly salary of average workers, purchases of clothes and jewelry for thousands of dollars, international vacations funded entirely with usurious credits. "From the moment they took on these debts," the prosecutor continued, "the defendants knew their only hope of solvency was to access their mother's assets. The death of their father in 2021 simply accelerated their criminal timeline." The financial investigator's testimony was particularly damaging to the defense. "According to our calculations, the defendants would have needed to work for 47 years without any personal expenses to pay off their debts with legitimate income. The elimination of their mother was not a desperate last-minute option. It was their financial plan from the beginning." Victor the Shark Adams also testified from prison, providing additional details about the conversations he had with my children. His testimony, although clearly motivated by the desire to reduce his own sentence, confirmed that David had specifically proposed the permanent solution to the problem when the initial attempts to get my money voluntarily had failed. The Parker family were not innocent victims of circumstance, Victor declared with a cynical smile. They came to me with a complete plan. They knew exactly how much money the old lady had. They knew how to access it. And when they proposed the faster alternative, they already had all the details worked out. During the closing arguments, the defense made one last desperate attempt to generate judicial compassion. The 3 lawyers emphasized the family tragedy of the case, arguing that imprisoning my children would leave me completely alone in my final years. However, Prosecutor Brooks effectively dismantled those arguments. Your Honor, the defendants do not deserve compassion for having destroyed the family bonds they voluntarily chose to break. Evelyn Parker will not be alone. She will be safe, protected from those who proved they were willing to murder her for financial gain. On December 18, 2023, after 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned unanimous verdicts of guilty on all charges against the 3 defendants. The presiding judge pronounced the sentences with appropriate solemnity. David Parker, Sophia Parker, and Megan Parker are found guilty of attempted first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit a crime, fraudulent administration of another's assets, and administration of controlled substances without consent. Each is sentenced to 15 years in prison without the possibility of parole before serving 10 years of the sentence. When I heard those words, I experienced a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and final justice. My children had received the appropriate consequences for their actions. But that didn't alleviate the pain of having forever lost the people who were once the most important thing in my life. Victor the Shark Adams and his associates received even harsher sentences. 18 years for Victor for leading the criminal organization and 12 years each for his accomplices for aggravated extortion and serious threats. As I was leaving the courtroom, for the last time, David shouted at me from the defendant's box. Mom, one day, you'll regret this. We're your only family. I turned to him one last time and replied, David, my family died the night you decided to kill me. The criminals going to prison today just happened to have my children's names. While most of the courtroom spectators and reporters stood in silent respect for an elderly woman who had shown remarkable courage, I noticed one person who seemed particularly moved by the proceedings, a young woman of about 30, who had attended every day of the trial, sitting quietly in the back row. As I walked past, she caught my eye and nodded with a mixture of compassion and understanding I couldn't quite place. It wasn't until weeks later that I would learn the significance of that moment and how it would shape the next chapter of my life. The months following the trial marked the beginning of the most transformative stage of my existence. January 2024 arrived with a sense of liberation I hadn't experienced since Jack's death. For the first time in years, I could sleep peacefully knowing that no one was planning to harm me, that my financial decisions were genuinely my own, and that the people close to me valued me for who I was, not for what I possessed. The first important decision I made was to legally formalize my relationship with Sarah and Olivia. On February 15, 2024, accompanied by my lawyer and before Thomas Johnson, the same lawyer who had been manipulated years ago by David, I completed the paperwork to establish a family trust that would guarantee their financial future. Evelyn, it's admirable how you've transformed such a traumatic experience into an opportunity to build genuine family bonds, Thomas said as we reviewed the documents. Thomas, I've learned that true family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty, selfless affection, and the willingness to protect one another, I replied, signing the papers with a steady hand. Sarah cried when I explained the details of the trust. I had established a full educational fund for Olivia that would cover everything, from her primary education to university studies, including postgraduate specialization if she so desired. I had also created a security fund that would guarantee Sarah's economic stability for her entire life. Mrs. Parker, this is too generous, she protested, her voice choked with emotion. We didn't expect anything in return for doing the right thing. That's precisely why you deserve it, I replied, hugging her like the daughter I never thought I'd have again. You saved my life without expecting any benefit. Now I want to make sure you and Olivia have all the opportunities that my biological children squandered. Olivia's integration into my life was surprisingly natural. This intelligent 9-year-old girl possessed an insatiable curiosity and an innate kindness that constantly reminded me why it's worth building a better future. In March 2024, I enrolled her in a prestigious bilingual school that offered advanced academic programs. Grandma Evelyn, she said, using the title she had spontaneously adopted. Why do my classmates say it's strange that my grandma isn't really my grandma? Her words moved me deeply. Olivia, some grandparents are lucky enough to choose their grandchildren, and some grandchildren are lucky enough to choose their grandparents. We chose each other. In the afternoons, after Olivia finished her homework, we established routines that filled my life with renewed purpose. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I took her to piano lessons at the municipal conservatory. On Saturday mornings, we attended swimming lessons together at the local pool. On Sundays after church, we visited museums, parks, or simply walked through the historic downtown while she told me about her dreams and aspirations. I want to be a doctor like the one who took care of Mom when I was sick, she confided during one of those Sunday walks. But I also really like music. Can I be a doctor and a pianist at the same time? Olivia, you can be anything your heart and your hard work allow you to achieve, I replied. Buying ice cream at a shop near the cathedral. Your new situation will give you opportunities that many children don't have. But it will be your decisions and your dedication that determine what you do with those opportunities. My spiritual life also underwent a significant deepening during this period. Father William Carter had been my guide during the darkest moments after Jack's death. And now he became my partner in building something positive and lasting. Evelyn, he proposed during one of our post-Mass conversations in April 2024. I've been thinking about your situation. You have received a second chance at life, literally. You considered how you could use this experience to help others facing similar situations. His suggestion resonated immediately with my conscience. Father William, I've thought a lot about that. There must be other elderly people facing family manipulation, isolation, or financial abuse without the resources or support that I had. Exactly. And you have both the personal experience and the financial means to make a real difference. Over the following weeks, we developed the concept of what would become the Parker Center for Senior Support. The center would be named after Jack, honoring his memory while serving the community in a way he would have fully approved of. In May 2024, I acquired a 3-story building in a central neighborhood near the parish that had previously served as a community center. The renovation took 4 months, during which I worked closely with architects, social workers, and gerontology experts to create a space that was both functional and welcoming. The center included offices for free legal advice, spaces for psychological therapy, classrooms for educational workshops on financial protection, and a specialized library with resources for seniors. We also established a 24-hour emergency hotline for elderly people facing situations of abuse or family manipulation. Sarah accepted my offer to become the center's administrative director. Her personal experience with detecting abuse combined with her intuitive understanding of dysfunctional family dynamics made her the perfect person to lead the daily operations. Mrs. Parker, she told me during the first week of operation in September 2020. 24. We've received 17 calls from people who suspect they are being manipulated by family members. 3 cases seem as serious as yours was. What kind of manipulation are they experiencing? Cases involve adult children pressuring their parents to transfer properties, and one seems to be a situation where grandchildren are systematically drugging their grandfather to access his monthly pension. The realization that my experience was not unique, but part of a broader social problem motivated me to intensify our efforts. I hired 2 additional social workers, established partnerships with law firms specializing in family law, and developed community education programs on the warning signs of financial elder abuse. During this period of active rebuilding, I received exactly 47 letters from my children from prison. They all followed the same pattern: pleas for forgiveness, promises of change, appeals to family unity, and occasional veiled threats about my future loneliness without them. The first letter arrived in February 2024. David wrote, "Dear Mom, every day in prison I reflect on our mistakes. We were desperate, confused, influenced by evil people, but you are still our mother, and we are still your children. Please consider visiting us so we can better explain what really happened." I read each letter meticulously but never answered any of them, not out of cruelty, but because I had developed a clear understanding of the difference between genuine repentance and continued manipulation. Their letters never included a full acknowledgement of the gravity of their actions, never took full responsibility for their decisions, and always included justifications that minimized their guilt. In October 2024, Sophia tried a different approach, sending a letter that said, "Mom, Dad would be devastated if he knew you have completely rejected your children. He always believed in Christian forgiveness. Don't you think we've paid enough for our mistakes?" A letter bothered me more than the others because it used Jack's memory to emotionally manipulate me. I decided to respond, but not directly to her. Instead, I wrote a letter to the prison chaplain, Father Gabriel Smith, explaining my position and asking him to share it with my children if he deemed it appropriate. "Dear Father Gabriel," I wrote, "my late husband Jack did indeed believe in Christian forgiveness, but he also believed in justice, the protection of the innocent, and appropriate consequences for serious actions. Forgiving does not mean eliminating the legal consequences of a crime, nor does it require restoring relationships with people who proved they were willing to commit murder for financial gain. I have forgiven my children in my heart to free my soul from resentment, but that does not mean I should expose myself again to their toxic influence or pretend that our family relationship can be restored." One surprising development came in November 2024 when I received a letter from Megan that was distinctly different from all previous correspondence. Unlike her siblings, her words seemed to reflect genuine remorse rather than tactical manipulation. "Mom," she wrote, "I don't expect forgiveness or even a reply. What we did was unforgivable, and I accept that. Just want you to know that I've been attending therapy in prison and I'm beginning to understand the magnitude of what we plan to do. The person I became terrifies me, and I'm working every day to find my way back to the values you and Dad taught us. I don't blame you for cutting us out of your life. I would have done the same. While I still didn't respond directly, I asked Father Gabriel to tell Megan that I acknowledged her efforts and wished her healing on her journey. It was a small opening not to reconciliation, but to the recognition that even in the darkest hearts, change might be possible. At the end of 2024, while writing in my personal journal, a habit I had developed as part of my emotional healing process, I reflected on the extraordinary transformation my life had undergone. A year and a half ago, I was a lonely and vulnerable widow, manipulated by my own children, living in constant unknown danger. Today I was the grandmother of a wonderful girl who filled my days with joy, the adoptive mother of an exceptional woman who had risked everything to save me, and the founder of an organization that was helping dozens of people in situations similar to mine. On December 23, 2024, exactly 3 years after Jack's death, we organized a special celebration at the Parker Center. We had helped 112 seniors during our first 4 months of operation, preventing at least 6 serious cases of family financial abuse, and providing legal and emotional support to dozens of vulnerable people. Olivia, now 10 and thriving academically in her new educational environment, played the piano during the ceremony. She performed Boxa Maria, Jack's favorite piece, with a technique and emotion that would have made my late husband cry with pride. Father William offered a special blessing. Lord, bless this family that was formed not by biological accident, but by conscious choice based on genuine love, mutual loyalty, and a commitment to justice. May their example inspire others to recognize that true family is built on shared values, not blood ties. As I watched Sarah and Olivia, illuminated by the scent's Christmas lights, surrounded by elderly people who had found support and protection thanks to our work, I experienced a deep peace I hadn't felt in years. My financial fortune, which my biological children had coveted so much they had planned my murder for it, now served a purpose that Jack would have fully applauded: protecting the vulnerable, building opportunities for the deserving, and creating a legacy based on active compassion instead of passive accumulation. That night before sleeping in my renewed home, now filled with childish laughter, meaningful conversations, and the security of authentic family bonds, I wrote the final entry in my journal for the year. 78 years old, I have learned that the deepest betrayals can open paths to the most unexpected blessings. I lost 3 children who turned out to be greedy strangers, but I gained a loyal daughter and a precious granddaughter who fill my life with renewed purpose. My money, which once represented a mortal danger, is now a tool of protection and opportunity for others. Jack would be proud of the family we have built and the good we are doing in his memory. As the new year approached, I knew that my story wasn't over. There would be challenges ahead, perhaps even reconciliation attempts for my imprisoned children. But whatever came, I would face it with the wisdom of experience, the comfort of true family, and the knowledge that sometimes salvation comes in the form of a simple text message from an unexpected source. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. If you like this story, give the video a like and subscribe to the channel. To hear the next story, click on the box to the left. Thanks for watching. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family, as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You matter, your voice does too.